Guess who has two thumbs and is a little tardy to the party? This guy right here. Now, before I get into the spoilers, allow me to regale you with a tale from my youth. When I was a young wee lad, I was, in fact, and I'm sure you could tell by my looks, I was a skater. I was into skating. I had a skateboard and everything. Although I wasn't very good at it, I actually, the best thing I could ever do was a 180. That was the best I ever did, and I did it on accident, and I could never, ever recreate that. But I was good at, like, the dog walk, and that's the one where, like... Hold on. That's the wrong way. It was kind of like when you... Like when you got on the skateboard. Imagine there's a skateboard here, and you went... Then it walked for you, like you got it to move like inch away. I was pretty good at that. That one I did a whole lot. But suffice it to say, 180 was the greatest thing I had ever done, and I had never done an 180 since then. That was until just recently when I binged all of The Acolyte. Now, the way I wanted to watch this, as I heard all of the terrible things, as I'm sure you also heard, was that it was a terrible show. It was the worst show ever. It got canceled. It was really, really awful. Just in general, it was like if you pooped in your hands and clapped, and then even that wouldn't stink as much as The Acolyte. So I wanted to watch it for myself. I am a connoisseur of really bad movies. I am one of like 5 people in the world who actually watched Dragon Ball Evolution and watched the live-action Avatar movie. Yeah, that's right. I sat through that. So when I started watching this, I went in with really low expectations, and that may have been the basis for my thoughts on the show. It had like nowhere to go. It couldn't go farther down. Any farther down, you would be having to create a new circle of hell. And I thought that the show was actually kind of good. I know, the terrible takes around here. Terrible. And believe it or not, this is what I'm deciding to do with my time rather than work on another video. I'm procrastinating. The biggest issue with it was that the writers were really bad, but the actors were fine. And the biggest issue with the first episode is that they started just vomiting into your mouth all of the exposition leading up to all these characters, rather than show don't tell, rather than a backstory or dropping you into this universe where you can believe it. It was just like, hello, old friend, former Jedi from 6 years ago. You remember 6 years ago when you left the Jedi Order because you don't agree with the Jedi Order? Yes, well, you betrayed us, your closest friend. We would have married and probably kissed by now if you had stayed in the Jedi Order. But no, you couldn't, because we're Jedi and Jedi don't have it, but now you're not. Man, 6 years ago was weird time, wasn't it? And then there's just so much they just slap you in the face with it. But it's also like kind of fun bad at how bad it is, especially if you have a buddy with you just to watch and kind of laugh at a little bit. But it wasn't bad the first episode. So the next episode, episode 2, continues on with this assassin who I was already spoiled with, who these two people are. Also, they look identical, and it seems like the show is trying to make you go, oh, what is this that is going on? I cannot figure out these two people who look identical and where the story is going to go. I wonder if they're twins. And then there ends up being twins, and they're not the same people. But it does set up the premise for the show, and I think that the premise for the show is pretty interesting. Or at least what I thought was going to be the premise of the show. Before we get into what the actual premise of the show ends up being, we get to episode 3, which gives a backstory on these two twins. It goes, it is the twins. I bet you weren't going to think that the premise of the show was going to be trying to realize that they are in fact two people and not one person who might just have like weird bipolar issues or something like that. It's not for me because it's not super Star Warsy. The rest of the show fits in the Star Wars universe. Episode 3 is the only one that kind of makes me go, this doesn't feel like Star Wars. This feels like its own thing. Unlike Vision Season 2, which I thought was worse, and Tales of the Empire, which I also think were worse shows than this show, in fact, they kind of had an issue where it didn't feel like it was in the Star Wars universe. It felt like it was its own sci-fi thing. They just happened to have lightsabers. So it just wasn't for me, but it also gave a backstory to an actual cult that probably exists in this giant expanded universe. Then episode 4 hits. Episode 4 might be... It's not my favorite episode, but it's up there. That's not saying a lot. That doesn't mean that it's a 10 out of 10 episode. But the episode, it actually starts building tension, and then they start going places, rather than the other episodes where they all just sit in, like, one location, and they just exposition dump on you. This time, they're actually going to find out what this evil twin is doing. This evil twin, by the way, happens to be a Sith acolyte trying to learn the ways of the Sith, because she's bad, and her whole motivation is she's bad. Yeah. So there's just this whole team of Jedi, that are going after these suspicious, well, they're not suspicious deaths, because the evil, I'm trying to think of her, I can't even think of their names. None of these characters were memorable, unfortunately, except for the Jedi Padawan, who was female alien with the white. I don't know what her name was. I can't remember, but she was definitely the best character. I actually liked her. You got this group of Jedi who are trying to, who have kind of caught on to the motivation, or at least they have a theory for what the motivation is. And they are trying, and they assume that a Wookiee Jedi who has put himself in exile is going to be the next target. And they are correct. And so they're on their way, and they try to meet, and they do. They try to meet up with the evil one. The next episode, episode 5, is just a fight between the Sith and the Jedi. And then there's a dual fight between the two sisters. So they're basically having a moral fight and a physical fight. The actual Sith master, who isn't really the Sith master, he's... how to put it? He's kind of like Count Dooku, and the Acolyte is like Savage Opress, or Asajj Ventress. So the Acolyte is the assassin, or the apprentice to the apprentice, and the apprentice, the master apprentice, the middleman, is the disciple of who we can assume is Darth Plagueis in the last episode, from his little gremlin face peeking around a corner. Episode 6 happens, and this is where it kind of starts to go off the rails. They're trying to wrap up the story, and it feels like they're trying to wrap it up. She's not the Grand Master, because Yoda shows up in the last episode too. But she's definitely the one in charge, and she really sucks, just as a character in general. But she is now on her way to go help the Jedi, because all of them have died except for one, who has been the main character the entire time, or the main Jedi, the Master 2, the good version, the good twin. The good twin has been trying to clear her name, and actually didn't take a whole lot of convincing. They all just went, "Oh, your twin is actually alive? I thought she was lay dead." But she was not lay dead. She was actually alive. So episode 6 just felt like a giant slog of like, all right, we're wrapping it up. But they don't wrap it up just yet, because this is where the show takes a drastic turn. The show was probably like a 6. It's kind of like Last of Us 2, if I had to equate it to something. It wasn't really bad. It just was mostly not great. But then episode 7 happens, and episode 7 basically tries to clear up. It's almost like I know they didn't, but it felt like they knew that episode 3 was going to be very confusing. It was going to get a whole bunch of backlash. So they have episode 7, the penultimate episode, to explain episode 3 more. You know, the one where the twins are having their childhood backstory. And all it does is confuse everything. We got the idea that, like, the Jedi were like, we find Force-sensitive kids here. We want to take them and make them Jedi. And they even don't, like, just rip them from their family. The Jedi give them the choice. And episode 7 tries to clarify, like, each master's reasoning, especially the ones that have been murdered so far in the story. And we just don't know the reasoning. The young man who dies, the Padawan who dies in the second episode, who actually kills himself, we're led to believe that, like, maybe he did something really bad, and that's why he killed himself. In episode 7, we realize, no, he just wanted to go home. He just wanted to go home, and now he's blaming himself because the witches used Jedi mind tricks, I guess, to get into the minds of the Jedi. But it's different because they're more powerful. Let's go, women. Let's go. It just was really confusing, and I didn't know what to do with the new information that just made me more confused. That's the takeaway of episode 7, that I don't even know what happened, and I am blocking it from my memory. I am stopping myself. But then the last episode is so jumbled. It's like they were trying to land a whole bunch of different ideas and make a whole lot of different things happen, but they didn't really set it up well. Or, like, they thought that they were going to have, like, I don't know what it is with, like, this 8-episode series lineup. Why it's 8 episodes. I don't know why it's 10 episodes. Why it's 12. I don't know why they picked 8. But every single show that has had 8 episodes, it feels really rushed at the end. It feels like they should have 10 episodes, because every single one, especially the Acolyte, feels like it just can't stick the landing. They're trying to set up for something, and they feel like they have more time, but they don't actually have time to settle things. And so you get the final episode, which is apparently a love story between the Acolyte twin and the Sith master of hers, apparently. Also, the two twins completely, like, swap, like, ideas. So it turns out that they aren't actually twins. What they are the same, literally the same person, split into 2 people. So they don't outright say it, but it's like one sister was kind of like the evil, selfish desires, and the other one was the good. And the evil one was being evil the whole episode, and the good one was being good the whole show. The good show, the bad show, the good show. And then, much like this show, the good one just goes without any warning whatsoever. She just decides, you know what, I'm going to be evil now. And then they both kind of become evil. But then the evil one is like, wait, no, that's not what I wanted. And then she becomes good. So they kind of do like a role reversal. Rather than, like, what they were building up to, what was pretty obviously being built up to, was that the evil sister was going to see that she's been being deceived this entire time, and that she needs to let go of the selfishness that she's had for coveting her sister's attention and just being around her at all times, and let her sister have the life that she wants, and the good sister forgiving all the Jedi that she's killed. But that doesn't happen. And then the reason why this show that happens 100 years before The Phantom Menace, the reason why they don't talk about Sith, why the Jedi weren't alerted to the Sith presence, is because the Jedi are deciding to cover up everything that happened and blaming it on the master who has always been there and believed in the 2 sisters that they were good. This guy who is like the only person with character development throughout the entire show. And he ends up dying at the end. They blamed it on him. Rather than being like, hey, the Sith are back. I don't know. If you have any ideas for why that makes sense, I'd love to hear it. I feel like it is a miniature version of like Game of Thrones. It just dies. It dies in front of you. It's like if a puppy ran out into a road and then you watched it get hit by a car. And not only are you mortified, that person in the vehicle then backs up over it a couple of times, then starts wearing it as a festive hat. That's how I felt anyway with the end of The Acolyte. And I could go into the depths of some of these episodes and how dumb they were. The Sith Master, but not Plagueis Master, just mercilessly kills Jedi. But when it comes to the one little character, one of the two characters that we've been following this entire episode, just starts walking slowly towards them. And then a small little nothing burger of a blast hits him. And then he just looks over, and then just starts slasher film, turns away from that character, starts slowly walking towards the other. And then... But that character I told you about that I liked and thought was cool, yeah, no, they killed her off. They killed her off. That would have been really cool to have, but nope, can't have her. If I was to give it a compliment, it wasn't as bad as people said until episode 7 and 8 and 3. So it's only What's 3 divided by 8? It's like 20. Is that 40% ish? So like only 40% of the show is bad. And then as a little treat from the directors and the lead actress in this show, mostly the lead actress, has been going on and blaming people for being misogynist. And that is why the show is bad. No. No, the show is bad because the writing is bad. My favorite character was one of the female characters in here. I don't know if that absolves everything, but I would say the reason why I didn't like this is because it was terrible. So it's kind of like the gift that keeps on pooping. You know, it's a gift that keeps on giving, really, The Acolyte, except for the fact that it got canceled for season 2. And if I have to be honest, it didn't really deserve that. It didn't really deserve to be canceled. I think that there were significantly worse Star Wars shows recently than The Acolyte. I think it was on par with Vision Season 2. I think that those two were really, really neck and neck. So if you've seen Vision Season 2 and you haven't seen this, or vice versa, that's about where it is. The Borderlands movie, probably roughly the same, except for the Borderlands movie had bad jokes that were just really not funny and really painful. You know what? This was actually probably better than the Borderlands movie. I'll give it that. So that's what I'll leave it on. And that is why the Acolyte situation is super crazy and or insane. Smash like, subscribe. Do Patreon, please. Here's Patreon supporter, because they jumped straight to 25 tier. Thank you.